abandoned his wife on the day of childbirth to flee with his mistress. Days later, he couldn't believe what happened. On a cold winter night, what should have been the start of a new life turns into a nightmare. Abandoned by her husband at the most crucial moment, Laura finds herself alone to face the unexpected. A dark secret lurks in the shadows, while a web of lies threatens to destroy everything. Love and loyalty are put to the test. A winter night in Manhattan, the city lights reflected on the streets covered by a thin layer of snow. Laura, with trembling hands and a racing heart, felt a mixture of nervousness and excitement. She was about to give birth to her first child. Beside her, Richard, her husband, drove with a tense expression. He checked the clock every minute, which made Laura even more anxious. "Richard, I'm scared," Laura said, her voice trembling as she gripped the seatbelt. "What if something goes wrong?" Richard forced a smile, but his eyes remained fixed on the road. "Everything will be fine, Laura. Just relax." Upon arriving at the hospital, Laura was quickly taken to the delivery room. The contractions became more intense, and she hoped that Richard would be by her side to hold her hand and reassure her. Instead, he seemed increasingly distant, constantly fiddling with his phone. "Richard, can you please stay here with me?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. He hesitated, looking at his phone. "I need to take care of something. I'll be right back," he said abruptly and left the room, leaving Laura confused and alone. She barely had time to protest as the pains intensified and her attention shifted to the imminent birth. Hours passed, and Richard didn't return. Laura, exhausted and worried, asked the nurses about his whereabouts, but no one had any information. The situation became critical when the doctors noticed complications during the delivery. The baby was in distress, and the medical team decided on an emergency cesarean section. Feeling abandoned, Laura struggled to stay strong. As the doctors prepared for the surgery, thoughts of Richard and his disappearance lingered in her mind. "Where is he? How could he leave me now?" she thought, tears streaming down her face. Meanwhile, Richard was in a luxurious hotel room with Amanda, his mistress. They were lying in bed watching television. Amanda, a woman with blonde hair and a seductive smile, caressed Richard's arm. "Are you sure about this?" she asked, with a hint of concern. "I can't go back now," Richard replied, avoiding her eyes. "Everything is planned. We'll go to Mexico and start a new life." Amanda smiled, but there was a glimmer of uncertainty in her eyes. "And Laura? Will she be okay?" Richard sighed, rubbing his temples. "She'll get over it. She's always been strong." Back at the hospital, Laura, after a complicated surgery, gave birth to a healthy baby boy. The timid smile she managed to muster upon seeing her son was quickly replaced by silent tears of sadness and disappointment. She knew at that moment that she was alone. "My God, what am I going to do now?" she whispered to herself, feeling the weight of the responsibility of being a single mother. Determined to focus on her recovery and caring for her child, Laura tried to push away the painful thoughts of Richard. "He won't destroy this for me," she thought, looking at the little baby in her arms. She knew she had to be strong, for herself and for her son. What Laura didn't know was that this would be just the beginning of a series of events that would change her life forever. As she held her son for the first time, Richard and Amanda were discussing their escape plans, oblivious to the chaos and pain they had left behind. The next morning brought a brutal sense of reality for Laura. Waking up to the soft sound of machines around her, she felt weak and still dazed from the medication. Beside her, a kind-faced nurse held the little baby who had been born the night before. "He's a strong boy," the nurse said with an encouraging smile, placing the baby in Laura's arms. Laura looked at her son, feeling a mix of deep love and overwhelming sadness. "Where is Richard?" she asked, even though she knew the answer wouldn't come. His absence was an open wound, and every minute that passed without an explanation deepened her pain. Meanwhile, David, Laura's brother, arrived at the hospital with a face marked by worry. He had always been the protector of the family, and seeing his sister in such a vulnerable state filled him with anger. "Laura, what happened?" he asked, gripping her hand tightly. "Where's that bastard?" Laura couldn't hold back the tears. He left, David. He left me alone during the birth. David's expression hardened. He's going to pay for this, he muttered, trying to control his fury. I'm going to find out where he is. As Laura struggled to recover, both physically and emotionally, David began his own investigation. Using contacts and investigative skills, he soon discovered that Richard was with a woman named Amanda, maintaining a secret relationship for months. The revelation made him even more determined to make Richard pay for his cowardly behavior. Laura, upon learning of David's discoveries, was devastated. He was cheating on me this whole time, she whispered, incredulous. How could I have been so blind? It's not your fault, Laura, David said, trying to comfort her. He's a coward, and you deserve better. Anger and resentment began to grow within Laura. The image of Richard, the man she had dreamed of building a life with, was now distorted and unrecognizable. But while the pain was still deep, a new determination emerged. I need to recover, she said, with newfound firmness in her voice, for me and for our son. Meanwhile, Richard and Amanda were hiding in a small town near the Mexican border. Amanda, though aware of the gravity of the situation, seemed indifferent to Laura's suffering. When are we leaving? She asked, looking at Richard. Soon, Richard replied, though a flicker of worry crossed his eyes. He knew he was in a delicate situation, but remorse was beginning to grow. What have I done? He thought, increasingly aware of the consequences of his actions. At the hospital, Laura continued to cling to the small life in her arms. We'll be okay, she whispered to the baby. I promise. The words were more for herself than for her son, an attempt to convince herself that she could overcome the storm brewing in her life. David, for his part, was determined to confront Richard. He needs to face what he's done, he said to himself, as he prepared for a trip to find his brother-in-law. The fury he felt for Richard was just a reflection of the love he had for Laura, and he wouldn't rest until he ensured that she was safe and protected. Winter advanced and the tension grew. At the hospital, Laura felt a mixture of sadness and fury growing inside her. Each new revelation about Richard's actions felt like a direct blow to her heart. How could he be so cruel? She constantly questioned, trying to make sense of the pain. David, on the other hand, wasn't willing to wait for justice to take its natural course. He got involved in dark activities, seeking contacts from his past who could help him find Richard. He can't go unpunished, he muttered to himself, as he made calls and met with old acquaintances. David's thirst for revenge was clear, but he also knew he needed to protect Laura from any legal repercussions. Laura, even in her pain, began to realize the gravity of what David was planning. David, please, don't do anything rash, she pleaded, holding her brother's hand. I don't want you to get hurt because of this. I know what I'm doing, David replied with a determined look. That man needs to pay for what he's done. With the help of his contacts, David discovered that Richard and Amanda were hiding in a cheap hotel near the border. The news brought a mixture of relief and terror to Laura. He's so close, and yet so far, she thought, with a growing sense of despair. David set up an ambush, intending to scare Richard enough that he would never return. However, things got out of control. During the confusion, one of David's henchmen shot Richard, leaving him gravely injured. The horror of the situation left David in shock. This wasn't supposed to happen, he repeated, incredulous. I just wanted justice, not a blood crime. The news of the shooting quickly reached the hospital. Laura received the information with a mix of shock and concern. He's injured? She asked, feeling a wave of panic. Despite everything, she didn't wish harm on Richard. I just wanted him to take responsibility, she murmured, tears streaming down her face. While Richard fought for his life, Amanda disappeared, leaving behind only a trail of uncertainties. The police launched an investigation, and suspicions about David's involvement in the incident began to grow. Laura found herself in a nightmare. What else could happen? She asked herself, feeling the weight of a situation that was completely out of her control. Amid this chaos, Sarah, Laura's best friend, appeared with even more disturbing information. I found out something about Richard, she said hesitantly. Laura looked at her, bracing herself for the worst. He wasn't just cheating on you with Amanda. He was involved with a drug cartel. Sarah's words hit Laura like a punch. Drug trafficking? She repeated, incredulous. How did I never know? He hid it well, Sarah said, showing some documents that confirmed Richard's connection to criminal activities. This is much bigger than we thought. David, upon hearing Sarah's revelations, felt a renewed fury. This man, he brought danger to all of us, he said, clenching his fists. I need to end this. Laura, amidst the whirlwind of emotions, tried to stay focused on her son. I need to protect my baby, she thought, more determined than ever. Despite all the revelations and dangers, she knew she had to be strong. The future was uncertain, but Laura was determined to face everything that came her way, with courage and determination. While Richard remained in the hospital, gravely injured, the chaos around him only intensified. The revelations about his involvement with drug trafficking brought new risks, not just for him, but also for Laura and her son. The authorities began to investigate more deeply, and the situation quickly escalated to a national security issue. This is out of control, Laura thought, distressed. Sarah, realizing the growing danger, decided to act to protect her friend. Laura, you need to get out of here, she insisted, gripping her hands tightly. This isn't safe for you or the baby. Laura hesitated. The idea of abandoning everything she knew, even with all the associated pains, was terrifying. Where would I go? She asked, her voice trembling. And what about David? I know someone in the FBI, Sarah said with an urgent tone. They can put you and the baby in a witness protection program. It's the only way to ensure your safety. Laura looked at her son, peacefully sleeping in the nurse's arms. I would do anything to protect him, she thought. With a deep sigh, she nodded. All right, let's do it. While Sarah made the necessary arrangements, David was facing his own internal battle. I caused this, he murmured to himself, feeling the weight of his actions. The guilt over the shooting that left Richard on the brink of death was overwhelming. I just wanted to protect her, he repeated, trying to convince himself that his intentions were just. However, reality was more complex. David knew that what he had done couldn't be undone, and the consequences of his actions were closing in. The police were already watching him, and he knew it was only a matter of time before everything collapsed. At the hospital, Richard finally regained consciousness. He was weak and confused, with pain and fear dominating his thoughts. What happened? He asked, trying to get up. The police officers around him had no sympathy. You're in custody, Richard, one of them informed him, for your actions and your involvement with the cartel. Richard felt panic rising. He knew he was in trouble, and the fear of what might happen to him at the hands of the cartel was overwhelming. They're going to kill me, he thought, desperate. Even in prison, I won't be safe. Meanwhile, Sarah managed to convince the FBI to take on the case. With evidence of Richard's criminal activities and the threat from the cartel, the FBI agreed to place Laura and her son in the witness protection program. You'll need new identities, the agent said, handing the documents to Sarah. This means leaving everything behind. Laura took the documents, feeling a mixture of relief and sadness. I have no choice, she thought. For my son's sake, I need to do this. Before leaving, Laura had one last conversation with David. He was visibly worn down, knowing that this might be the last time he would see his sister. Forgive me, Laura, he said, his voice breaking. I just wanted to protect you. Laura held David's hands, her eyes filled with tears. I know, David, she replied, trying to hide her own pain. But now we need to move on. With that, Laura left the city under FBI protection. As she embarked on an uncertain future, David stayed behind, facing the consequences of his actions. The guilt and sadness weighed heavily on his shoulders, but he knew there was nothing more he could do. The case involving Richard and the cartel began to attract international attention. With the help of information provided by the FBI, authorities discovered that the cartel operated in several countries. The situation became a multinational operation, with authorities from various countries working together to dismantle the criminal organization. David, now fully immersed in his own choices, continued to provide information to the police, trying in some way to mitigate his own mistakes. He knew his time was running out. I just hope this helps Laura, he thought, as he handed over another set of incriminating documents. Meanwhile, Richard, still in custody and constantly fearing for his life, faced intense interrogations. The agents wanted all the information he had about the cartel, and he knew that his survival depended on cooperating. I have no choice, he murmured to himself, trying to stay calm. It's that or die. The situation reached a critical point when a group of armed men, presumably linked to the cartel, tried to invade the hospital to silence Richard. The police, already on alert, managed to thwart the attack, but the incident made it clear how dangerous the situation was. They'll go to the end, one of the agents commented, watching the suspects being taken away. With the threat becoming increasingly real, the FBI decided to take action. A massive operation was organized to arrest the cartel leaders. David, knowing that his involvement in the shooting could complicate things, decided to help at any cost. If it means taking them down, then I'll do it, he thought, determined. During the operation, which took place in several cities simultaneously, David was confronted by one of the cartel's henchmen. "You betrayed us," the man shouted, pointing a gun at David. A shootout ensued and David was hit. As he fell, he felt the physical pain mix with emotional despair. I failed Laura, he thought, as darkness enveloped him. The operation was a success, with the arrest of several high-ranking members of the cartel. The news of the cartel's dismantling brought brief relief to Laura, who was now in a safe place with her son. However, the news of David's death devastated her. "He was my brother," she whispered, as silent tears fell. "He just wanted to protect me." Even with the operation's success, Laura knew that the danger wasn't completely gone. The cartel is big, she thought, as she rocked her son. But at least now we have a chance. With the cartel dismantled, Richard faced a long prison sentence. He knew his life was in ruins, and the fear of retaliation from the cartel was constant. I made terrible choices, he reflected, as he was taken to prison. And now, I'm paying for all of them. For Laura, life went on, but with a new perspective. David's sacrifice wouldn't be forgotten, and the fall of the cartel brought a sense of justice. I'll move forward, she promised herself, looking at her son, for me and for him. With the cartel dismantled and the main culprits in prison, Laura finally began to rebuild her life. Under a new identity and in a new town, she devoted herself to providing a safe and loving home for her son. The small town where they settled was peaceful, far from the painful memories of the past. Sarah, Laura's faithful friend, was by her side throughout the process. Let's start over, she said as the two explored the town. Sarah opened a small bookstore, an old dream that finally came true. Laura offered to help whenever she could, finding comfort in simple activities and in the company of her friend. Laura also started volunteering at a local organization that helped women in vulnerable situations. Using her experience, she supported other women who faced similar challenges. Every story is unique, she reflected, as she listened to the other women's accounts. But all of them deserve a second chance. The FBI continued to monitor Laura and her son, ensuring they were safe. Although the risk still existed, the immediate danger had significantly diminished. Laura, now more confident and strong, focused on creating a new and positive life. I won't let fear control me, she thought, as she took her son to the local park. We'll live fully. Therapy sessions were also a crucial part of Laura's healing process. With each session, she unraveled a bit more of the layers of pain and trauma she had accumulated. It's a slow process, her therapist said, but you're on the right path. Over time, Laura began to feel like part of the local community. She made new friends and got involved in town activities, like festivals and community events. It's good to feel like I belong somewhere again, she commented to Sarah, as they participated in a craft fair. The small town offered the peace and anonymity she needed to start over. Laura's new beginning was marked by moments of reflection and gratitude. She often thought of David, missing her protective brother, but also recognizing the sacrifice he made. He wanted the best for me, she reflected, as she placed a photo of him in her new home. I'll honor that by living the best way I can. As time passed, the sense of safety and normalcy began to grow. Laura watched her son develop, surrounded by love and care. The small house where they lived became a cozy home, filled with laughter and new memories. We're doing well, she thought, as she watched her son play in the backyard. Finally, we can breathe. Laura's new life was a testament to her resilience and courage. She had faced immense challenges but managed to rise and find happiness. It wasn't easy, she admitted to herself, but it was necessary. She knew the future would still bring challenges, but now, she felt prepared to face them. I have everything I need, she thought, holding her son in her arms. Love, support, and a new chance. As the sun set in her new town, Laura felt a sense of peace and fulfillment. The past was still present in her memories, but it no longer dictated her future. This is our new beginning, she whispered to her son. And I couldn't be more grateful. Laura promised herself that she would continue to fight for a full and happy life, not just for herself but also for her son. She knew that with love and determination, she could overcome any obstacle. The journey so far had not been easy, but finally, Laura felt that she was exactly where she was meant to be. The new life was just beginning, and she was ready to embrace whatever the future might bring.